Joining us now to break down some of the reasons how we got here and how quickly we got here, Steve Milloy, a former Trump EPA transition team member, founder of junkscience.com. It's great to have you on here, Steve. You have so much insight into all these policies. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bianca.
So let's start off in asking you about, obviously, 365 days disaster here. The decision first, day one to end the Keystone Pipeline project sort of put us in this trajectory and playing into the energy crisis. You absolutely have to say that was the cornerstone. That is what sort of began all of the issues that we're seeing now that Americans are feeling in their pocketbooks.
Sure. And of course, Joe Biden campaigned on continuing the Obama war on fossil fuels. And so the first thing he did when he became president, one of the first things was to kill the Keystone XL pipeline, which killed 8,000 to 11,000, high-paying jobs. And then next, he threatened to end new leasing for oil and gas wells on federal lands, and that threatened another 40 to 80,000 jobs. And so all this sent a terrible message to our oil and gas industry, which had made America energy dominant under President Trump. And so, they have been, they've been afraid to produce. And
right.
Along comes a global energy crisis caused by green policies in Europe. And all of a sudden, we're short on oil and gas, and it was all terribly avoidable. And it's all Joe Biden's fault.
Totally avoidable. And now we're looking at OPEC again. And, another thing that you think could have been avoidable, in fact, may have actually been something they wanted to see happen, is our gas prices. We know everyone's complaining. They're all trying to, you try to find the lowest gas price. You drive out of the way because you don't want to spend too much. We're all kind of looking for a deal. But we actually pulled up a soundbite. This is what you say is proof that the Biden administration wanted Americans to feel these high gas prices. Let's all take a listen. This is Jen Psaki at the podium back in November.
Our view is that the rise in gas prices over the long term makes an even stronger case for doubling down our investment and our focus on clean energy options so that we are not relying on the fluctuations and OPEC and their willingness to put more supply and meet the demand in the market.
Way to spin it there, right? So the long-term look is this is a good thing. But right now, in the day in and day out, we can barely survive here in America. Steve, you got to give us your reaction to that.
Well, of course. I mean, that's outrageous. They actually want high gas prices to force us off gasoline. Well, what are we going to use instead? Nothing else makes sense. And of course, this is not a new policy. This goes back to the Obama administration, which Joe Biden was a part of, where, the energy secretary at the time said they wanted to see $8 gasoline. Well, I mean, they're doing their best to get us there. I mean, it's just outrageous. And of course, high gasoline prices, not only do they hurt people's pocketbook today, but they just fuel inflation throughout the economy, make everything more expensive because our entire economy depends on fossil fuels. There's nothing that happens without fossil fuels, and you're just going to make it pointlessly expensive. Keep in mind, Joe Biden and John Kerry both admitted this year that there's nothing the U.S. can do on climate. Even if we go to zero emissions, it's not going to make a difference. So we're just pointlessly raising gasoline prices, and then making ourselves depend on OPEC again. It's just a total disaster, and that's what it's been.
And that's a big point. We don't want to gloss over that, Steve. I mean, when you hear John Kerry, who flies in a private jet, mind you, his climate czar, really admitting that this is just pointless, and even if we do all this, it's really not going to work, yet they do it anyway. It just doesn't seem to compute there. They're telling us it's not going to work, yet they do it. How is this not like the biggest headline? How are people not just pointing at this administration saying, fail, fail, fail?
Yeah, and it's not like they're saying this secretly. John Kerry said this in an interview to the Washington Post. He said it at COP26, the UN climate conference. Joe Biden said it in his address to Congress last year. It's just that the mainstream media doesn't want to report any of this. And, John Kerry has said that even if the U.S. and China go to zero emissions, it's not going to make a difference. Well, why are we wasting our time? Why are we making gasoline cost more? Why is the whole agenda to make energy cost more if it's all pointless?
Well, obviously, they want us to all be in electric cars, too, and that's a whole other topic we don't have time to get into there, but where the taxes can be on the grid and, where we're going there. Is there any good news we can pass along to people? I mean, you've analyzed all this, the climate and energy policies that, the Democrats are pushing. Is there anything you can give us? Leave us with a shred of optimism, Steve, please.
Well, the good news has been Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, because they have stopped Build Back Better. That bill would have federalized the electricity grid, would have made us spend $500 billion on climate nonsense. Joe Manchin almost single-handedly put the kibosh on that. Kyrsten Sinema helped. Since then, Biden has talked about spinning out the climate provisions of Build Back Better. But New York Times reports today that the Republicans are against those climate provisions 100%. So, and Joe Manchin is probably going to be against it. So I don't expect any of this to happen. So the good news is that Congress is against, legislative action on climate, which is great. But the bad news for this year is that Biden is going to try to ram his climate agenda through the regulatory agencies like EPA.
But it is the midterm, so we hold out hope. Steve Milloy, we thank you so much for your insight. Great having you here today on John Bachman Now.